Hey, friends, did you know that the average American kid has a poster with a picture of his favorite role model on it hanging in their bedroom? That poster hangs on the wall and it bears the image of either a favorite singer, an actor, an actress, or an athlete. And as the child grows up, that hero on that poster might change, or the poster may even come off the wall. Yet somewhere in your mind, the poster remains, the image of success. You know, having such a poster can be an incredibly powerful motivating force. It empowers us to think outside of our own box and to imagine a greater, a more impressive, a more actful version of ourselves. But you know what? That is valuable when the words of our prophet Isaiah, which he states, "Your eyes behold your teacher." That is when you envision a role model, a poster of a role model who has succeeded at breaking down his or her barriers from within and without. It actually helps us aspire to live to such a higher ideal. So who then should be the poster of every Jew who aspires to become better? I mean, who's the ideal Jew? The one who's got it all figured out. The one who knows, who always knows where to go, what to do, and whose lead we can follow to get to where we want to be in life. Now, the Torah is filled with role models, beginning with the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the matriarchs, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, and throughout history, there's many great people. But in this week's Torah portion, we are told who the role model of every Jewish child should be. We are told that when Yaakov, known as Jacob, he neared the end of his life, and he wanted to bless his two grandsons who lived in Egypt, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born to his son Joseph. Ephraim and Manasseh were Joseph's sons who were born to him in Egypt. And Jacob said the following, "By you shall Israel bless." That means all Jewish people, future generations, when they want to bless their children, they should say, "May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh, like Joseph's sons." And Rashi, the commentary, says, from now on to all generations of Jews, whenever a father or a parent wants to bless his sons, he will say that blessing, "Yesimcha Elokim k'Ephraim v'Manasseh." May God make you like the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. You, he tells Ephraim and Manasseh, they will be the role models that everyone will try and strive to emulate. Now one can just wonder, why Ephraim and Manasseh? I mean, surely they were great people, but we don't even know much about them. I mean, seemingly, Ephraim and Manasseh are defined by their anonymity. The Torah just tells us very little about them. They were there as Joseph's sons who were raised in Egypt and helped their dad. We don't know much about their life story. We don't know what kind of people they were, what their interests were, what their accomplishments were. In fact, other than the fact that they were born in Egypt and that Jacob blessed them before his passing, we don't have even one single story about them in the Torah. So what makes them the perfect role models, the poster boys for every Jewish child in every generation to come, that until today, in 2023, we bless our children. May you be like Ephraim and Manasseh. Why should we want our children to be like them? What was unique about them? And what does that even mean? Especially, we don't really know much about them. One may ask, were they great Torah scholars? Were they great philanthropists? Were they great community leaders? I want to know, what exactly is it that we want our children to emulate when we bless them to be like Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh? And moreover, of all the greats in our history, why are Ephraim and Manasseh singled out for the distinction as role models for every Jewish child? Why don't we say, may your children be like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or like the 12 tribes, or like the matriarchs, or like Miriam, or Yocheved, Moshe's brothers and sisters, Moshe's brother Aaron and his sisters Miriam, or like David and Jonathan, who were two best friends? Why do we choose to bless our children to be like Joseph's sons in Egypt? So I'd like to share with you an answer shared by Rabbi Tzvi Elimelech Shapiro of Dinov. He was one of the great Hasidic masters of Galicia, known for his famous work, the Bnei Yisachar, and it's a very moving and an enlightening answer. He says, we may not know much about Manasseh and Ephraim, but if you look carefully at the story, you can see that the little we know about them, the very little, speaks volumes about what kind of people they were. You see, Yosef is informed that his father Jacob is approaching his final moments. Jacob's about to pass away. He lives in Egypt at this point. So Joseph hurries to his father in Goshen with his 2 sons, and he presents them before his father. He says, "Daddy, please bless my 2 sons." And Joseph places Manasseh, his firstborn, to Jacob's right, and Ephraim, the younger one, to Jacob's left. And this way, Joseph assumes that Jacob will place his right hand on the older one, and his left hand, which is the more dominant hand, and the left hand will be on the younger one. But to Joseph's great surprise, Yaakov, when he crosses his hands, and he places his right hand on Ephraim, the younger one, and he places his left hand on Manasseh, the older one. And it says in the verse, this bothered Joseph greatly. He was troubled by this notion of his older son being deprived of the firstborn rights. And for good reason. We already saw 4 times in the book of Genesis. In this Shabbat, we finished reading the whole book of Genesis, book of Bereshit, and we saw 4 times that you must be careful when it comes to the older children and the younger siblings, because 4 times the order of succession was disturbed, and each time with disastrous results. The first of the 4, as we know, the first story of the Torah, Cain and Abel. When Cain was the younger one, Cain, who upon seeing his younger brother, Hevel, Cain was the older one, and he saw God accepted the offering of the younger one, Hevel. He was so upset that God accepted the younger one's offering, that what did he do? He killed his brother. There was another story of Ishmael, who couldn't stomach to see his younger brother outshine him. Yitzchok was his younger brother, and he tried to kill his younger brother, even though he was the older one. He was jealous of his younger brother. And then we know the famous story of Jacob and Esau. Esau was the older one of the twins. They were twins. Yet, Jacob received the blessings that were reserved for the older one. And Esau was so angry that we know on Jacob, that Jacob had to flee for his life and remained away from his father for 22 years. And finally, the fourth of these 4 stories that brought about the challenges when we took away the rights of the older one, Joseph himself, when the brothers perceived that their father favored the younger brother, Joseph was the 11th of 12, it was too much for them to bear, and the only way they were able to cope was get rid of Joseph once and for all. So friends, the precedent is already established beyond refute. Favoring a younger child over an older one is a recipe for disaster. And yet, here we see that Jacob takes his right hand and puts it on the hand of the younger one. And he takes his left hand and puts it in the hand of the older. And this horrified Joseph so much that he grabbed his father's hands and he said, "No, Daddy, you're getting the order mixed up. Manasseh is older. He's the first one." And what did Jacob say? Don't worry. Because Jacob says something so unique and special. Because Jacob foresaw a new precedence. Jacob saw that for all the brotherly rivalries in history, Ephraim and Manasseh are going to be the first one to break this vicious cycle. Because at that very moment of truth, when Jacob placed his right hand on Ephraim, the younger one, what does Manasseh do? The older brother doesn't get angry. He doesn't say, "Hey, Grandpa, I'm the older one." He doesn't pull out a sword. He doesn't threaten. He doesn't even dispute the motion. He accepts it. He finds within his heart to let his brother shine. Jacob sees this, and he realizes he is looking at greatness, at holiness. Finally, here's a set of brothers who behave towards one another the way brothers are supposed to behave, with love, mutual respect, and the ability to let someone else have something even when you do not. And friends, this is why Yaakov proclaimed that the Jewish people should always bless their children forever and ever, precisely through Ephraim and Manasseh. Because the greatest blessing, one that God grants every Jewish child, is the ability for a brother to be happy in his brother's joy, to exult in his brother's success, and to fargin, as they would say, to be happy when his brother or sister, who's younger, shines in the limelight. And this, Yaakov tells us, is a key to living a healthy Jewish life. For in addition to being the only way to avoid resentment between brothers specifically, this is really an integral part of the Jewish approach of life in general. that every one of us must realize. That what I have not been given is not meant for me. If heaven has granted something to him and not to me, it means it's part of his mission. It's his purpose and not mine. And this basically means that even I had what he had, I really wouldn't be any happier. Instead, I really need to focus on what God has given to me, because those are the tools that I need for my mission. And indeed, the secret to happiness, to real happiness in life, is to understand that I can't do my brother's job, he can't do mine, and that we must each eat from our own plate. And that really goes to the very core of serving God, each with our own unique abilities. You lose sight of the fact, and you not only have heartache and aggravation, but the failure to live up to your full potential, God forbid. So instead, all the energy will be wasted chasing something you cannot and should not ever achieve. Friends, the Rebbe actually illustrates this idea with a story handed down from the times of the first Chabad Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe. The Rebbe says, a story, there was once a wealthy businessman traveling with his wagon driver. One Friday afternoon, they pulled into a town, a little shtetl, somewhere along their journey. Shabbat was coming. And here they come into this town, the wealthy man with his wagon driver, right before Shabbat was about to begin. The rich man went to his lodgings, poor man went to his lodgings. And after they settled into their lodgings, the businessman, he went off to get ready for Shabbat. He put on a nice suit and a nice tie. It was all ready. As he's walking to Shul for Shabbat, in his finest clothes, he sees there's another wagon stuck in the mud. And the driver is really working hard to get his horse and buggy out. The rich man wants to help, but he doesn't have experience with horses and wagons. He pushes, he pulls, but he doesn't know what he's doing. He's getting bruised, he's getting bloodied and muddy, his whole suit is all dirty. And that's how he came to synagogue. Just as services were ending, looked like one big mess. Meanwhile, the wagon driver, he actually went to services early. He sat down, he recited some prayers, and then he enjoyed the beautiful prayer service. And by the time the prayer service ended, he was in such a good mood that when he saw there was some other poor people or peddlers waiting for someone to invite them home for Shabbat dinner, he said, you know what, guys, why didn't you come with me? I don't have much, I'm a poor guy, but I'm staying in this lodging. He was very humble. He said, come with me to my motel room for Shabbat dinner. Friends, think of this story. Everyone had good intentions, but everybody was playing the wrong role. The Rebbe explains. He said, had the wagon driver been the one to help with the wagon, it would have been taken out of the mud quickly, because that's what he knew how to do. And had the businessman actually invited a guest, the poor people in the synagogue, to stay at his lodging, they actually would have had a proper meal in a proper setting. But instead, the wagon remained in the mud. The poor people remained hungry. And the businessman was a mess. The power of a successful Jewish life is to remember to stay in one's lane. And that is the hallmark of a man with a divinely ordained mission. And many brothers struggle to internalize this. But Ephraim and Manasseh, Joseph's two sons, they understood this well. And for that, they are a role model for every Jew and for every person in the world in every generation. And friends, that leads us to another point about Yaakov's decision to hinge his eternal blessings on Ephraim and Manasseh. And this beautiful explanation comes from the teachings of the Rebbe that he delivered at a gathering on a Shabbat, Parshas Vayechi, this Shabbat, 1969. It was a week of many young professionals that were gathering Crown Heights for something called a Pagisha. It was like a Shabbaton. College students and young professionals from all around the United States, they would come to Crown Heights during their winter break, which we're in now. And, of course, the students would come to the Rebbe's gathering on Shabbat. And on that Shabbat, the Rebbe spoke in a very lively and an energetic tone, and he delivered the following powerful idea. And it's actually, if you want to see the source, it's in the Likutei Sichos, the writings of the Rebbe, volume 5. And the Rebbe said, to understand the place of Ephraim and Manasseh in the chain of Jewish tradition, we must remember the actual context surrounding this episode. Because when Yaakov found out, think of this, Yaakov's in Israel, he finds out that Joseph is alive and well in Egypt. 22 years, he didn't know if his son was alive. He finds out, he's all excited. He leaves He takes his whole family, wife, kids, and everybody. They said, we're going to go from Israel to Egypt. Now, at that time, Egypt was spiritually a very low materialistic place on earth. It was full of sinful behavior. It wasn't a good spiritual place. That when Yaakov's grandparents, Abraham and Sarah, when they were there, two generations before that, they even said, you know what? He said, Sarah, tell them you're my sister, not my wife, because it's a very lewd place. And he didn't want them to take his wife away because that's what they would want him. And it wasn't a spiritual place. It was not a good place spiritually. And Yaakov was sure that he's going down to Egypt, and he already has 2 grandsons that were born to Joseph there, and he didn't think that they're really doing very well spiritually. I mean, think of this. Today, 2023, we're blessed to raise children in a society where hopefully things are better spiritually, but we still worry. How are they going to turn out with everything going on in the world? How did Yaakov think his grandsons are now in Egypt? How are they doing in that corrupt moral place? So when Yosef and his 2 sons come to greet Yaakov, Yaakov comes down to Egypt, and Yaakov is worried, what are they going to look like? I mean, he was actually having all these dreams, thinking maybe his sons are going to come with long curly hair, and with a nice Mediterranean tan, and wearing some most Egyptian clothing that might have not have been the most modest clothing. But you know what happened? When Yaakov came down to Egypt, and he met Yosef and his 2 grandsons, you know what he saw? He saw Ephraim. He saw Menashe. They looked like yeshiva boys. They looked like they had their beard. They looked like young rabbis. They wore kippah. They wore tzitzis. They were innocent. They were refined. And he was so touched, so deeply, how these 2 young men could have remained true to their Jewish faith, not because they were sent to any yeshiva. They didn't go out of town to go study somewhere. Quite to the contrary. They were so different. They found that inner conviction to stand up to the whole world and remain true to their identity. And this, the Rebbe says, is why he chose them as role models for every Jewish child in the future. And he says, Yesimcha Elokim ke'Ephraim ke'Menashe. By you shall all future fathers bless their children, because you are the future. You're the guarantee of Jewish continuity. And because of it, if it could be done in Egypt, it definitely can be done in every era, every land, in every generation, in every family, in 2023, in Nashville, Tennessee, and around the world. And looking at Ephraim and Menashe, Yaakov saw that the project that was initiated by Abraham and continued by Isaac and then by Jacob himself succeeded 100%. They succeeded in their mission of founding an eternal Jewish people. Am Yisrael Chai V'Kayam. We are alive and we are here to stay, no matter who tries to annihilate us. No matter what the external environments or challenges may be. We were, and we will always be. And everything that our patriarchs did was for this moment today. Abraham was the first one to create a nation defined not by its present, but by its future. Abraham focused less on the existing now and more on continuing forever. And Abraham was the first to ask, not who am I, but what will be left after I am gone. And in this way, he began a movement that remains in the children even after the parents are no longer here. And this, friends, is the only way to keep something going in this world. For our lives have to have real meaning. Our purpose must be passed on and effectuated by those who come after us. And it was Ephraim and Menashe who proved the possibility of this project. Here you have 2 boys raised so far away from the center of Judaism, surrounded by anything and everything that contradicts the value of their ancestors. And yet, they live like proud Jews. And this was the ultimate case study, the ultimate testimony that it works. And therefore, it's no wonder then that Yaakov was so moved by this sight that he proclaimed, through you, Israel shall be blessed for all generations. And indeed, friends, this is the wish of every Jewish parent, that their children be like Ephraim and Menashe, with a strong sense of Jewish identity, anchored deep within, ignited by the unwavering Jewish spirit, unswayable by the forces of the environment, be it Egypt, be it Nashville, be it Los Angeles, be it South Africa, or be it wherever you may be. How do you do it? How do you train your kids to have such confidence? How do you raise children in Cairo who are the same as though they had been raised in Jerusalem or in Brooklyn? And there the Rebbe explains. And the Rebbe says that the answer could be found in the meaning of the name Joseph gave to his two sons born in Egypt. His firstborn son, Menashe, he said, you know why I gave him that name? Because Menashe is the meaning that God caused me to forget all my toil and my father's home. And by giving this name, Joseph was making an eternal reminder of his father's house. Joseph made a commitment to himself and to his fledgling family that he will always remember where he came from. And every Shabbat, you know what Joseph did? He was the viceroy of Egypt, but every Friday night he would sit down with his children. He would tell them about his youth, about the Shabbos songs he would sing at the Shabbos table of their grandfather, Jacob, and their great-grandfather, Isaac. And Joseph would describe the beauty and purity. He would tell the stories and share words of Torah. He planted within them the seeds of their exalted roots, of who they were and what they stood for. Now with such seeds, a forest like the one in back of me, a forest of living trees will certainly blossom. And what did Joseph name his younger son? Ephraim, which means God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. And this name, Joseph paid homage to the other dimension of his new life. Yes, I'm afar from home. Yes, I miss home. But now God placed me here, and he made me fruitful here. And I'm not here by mistake. I have a mission to accomplish here. I must, and with God's help, will be fruitful. I will take these dark surroundings and make them brighter by infusing within them the light I drew from my father's home. Now, Joseph really could have bemoaned the fact that his brothers were living in Israel with all the kosher restaurants, top-notch Jewish schools, and great Jewish kids for his children to be friends with and eventually to marry. And instead, he reveled. He felt pride in his mission right there in Egypt. And with these two guideposts, Joseph gave his sons everything they needed. Number one, a sense of identity and pride on one hand, coupled with a sense of unique purpose and mission on the other hand. You give a child these tools today, and he will have the confidence to live as a Jew in every situation, no matter what he faces in life. I want to share with you a story that I heard from the Chabad Shliach, the emissary in Anchorage, Alaska, Rabbi Joseph Greenberg. Yes, even in a place where the moose roam, they have a Chabad house. And Rabbi Greenberg says that when he moved to Anchorage, he made a mission, his own personal mission, to get to know every Jewish family in town. How did he do that? Anchorage didn't have many Jews. So he would visit local schools, local institutions, and he would say, I want to teach about the Jewish tradition, Jewish religion. And it was in this fashion that he one day came to a public school, and he came to broaden the children's horizon by educating them about a religion and the culture that many of them have never seen before, never met a Jew before. And of course, he was able always to get a feel if anyone in the school or the classroom he's talking to was from a Jewish family. He says one week, he walked into a classroom, and the children gathered around this friendly-looking figure who looked like he came straight out of the Bible, maybe from the book of Genesis. And he asked them here, has anyone here ever met a Jewish person? Expecting to get a no, one young student got up and said, hey, Rabbi, my mom is Jewish. Rabbi Greenberg knew he has an opportunity to make an impression upon this young little girl. And he says to her, listen here, my young student. He says, do you know that every Friday afternoon there's a tradition that Jewish women and girls from the age of 3 all over the world before sunset light Shabbat candles, which brings light and peace into their homes and into the world. And he says, this Friday, I want to ask you, can you please light a Shabbat candle too? He says, you know why? Because Alaska is the westernmost place in the world with a Jewish population. And it's really the last place that Shabbat begins. It started 23 hours earlier in New Zealand and every hour in another place. And the last place is Alaska. And he says, I want you to light a candle before Shabbat every week and know that all the Jewish women in the world and all the Jewish girls in the world, they who lit Friday night candles, they wait every week for your little candle to be lit. Because when you light your candle, you're completing that global circle of light that illuminates the entire world with Shabbat candles. Friends, this is how we want to bless our children to be like Ephraim and Manasseh. Because every child has a spark within and a mission to accomplish. And our job is to give confidence and pride to discover that mission and pursue it in their entire lives. Whether it's Cairo, Egypt, like Joseph's sons, whether it's New York, where I grew up, whether it's Anchorage or Nashville, wherever you may be. And friends, God has placed me and my family, with Esther and our family and children, in Nashville. And He placed each one of you where you're meant to be. And you're not here by mistake. You have a mission to accomplish in the places that you live your life right now. You must, and with God's help, will be fruitful. Make these dark surroundings brighter by infusing it with the light that we all draw from our Father's home, our patriarch and matriarch's home, the teaching of the Torah given to our ancestors at Sinai just a few generations ago. So I wish you all a week filled with meaning and purpose, and a beautiful Shabbat as you strive to be the lamplighter that will make your home a brighter and a better place, and a light to the world around you. I sign off for now as Rabbi Yitzchok Tiechtel with your weekly Parsha Perspective, and look forward to seeing you again next week. Shalom.